Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Animum Son Podcast. Second episode's officially a series. And today, we're going to be doing something that is heavily requested. It's on everyone's mind. This is the big show of the year. Probably one of the biggest shows of all time, really. We're, of course, talking about Magi. The most relevant show. Definitely the best show to gain popularity and to gain, viewership.
I think we decided to talk about this because it's not really talked about very
Yes.
much, and there's so many really super popular shows that everybody talks about and has an opinion about, and
I feel like me and you haven't talked about it as much as we talked about other shows. So I think we'll be kind of a little bit more surprised about how we feel about certain things about it, as we haven't talked about it too much, really.
true. And it is a show we have both watched in entirety and also the prequel for
Yes. So we're going to be talking about Magi, the Labyrinth of Magic, as well as Magi, the Kingdom of Magic.
it. Yes.
Very creative names. And then, of course, Magi, The Adventures of Sinbad, which the arguably worse, arguably better. Who knows how good it is compared to the other series of Magi. Sinbad's definitely the best character. But, we'll get into that eventually. So before we start this off, I just want to point out real quick that we'll be talking about all of Magi, spoilers included. So if you haven't seen Magi, and if you really want to, I guess, see Magi, you've had 8 years or so to see it. I guess you can pause this and go watch it and then come back. Or if you haven't seen Magi and you don't want to watch it, then you can keep watching because, who cares?
Although I would say the spoilers in the show are not really.
Yeah.
You could know everything that happens in the show,
very
and it really
predictable.
won't change your enjoyment of watching it. I think.
This is a very polarizing show. Either you're really going to like it or you're just really going to not like it, I find. It's a kind of a niche show, I would say. You agree with that?
I don't know if it's polarizing. I think it's kind of a middle of the road thing.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think anybody here is going to really love it.
Yeah. Maybe that's
really
fair
hate
to
it,
say.
hate it. It's just.
I guess it, like, I feel like it has a more niche audience. I feel like I would not recommend this just to random people. I would see what someone likes in anime, and then I would recommend it after that. I wouldn't just go around saying, like, oh, have you seen Magi? This show's amazing.
So what kind of person would you recommend this to?
Someone who's really into fantasy and someone who really likes it when the fantasy elements are more prevalent in the aesthetics and less prevalent in how the characters interact with one another, as well as, I guess, someone who does not care too much for fighting, because there is a decent amount of fighting in the show, but it's definitely second nature to like a lot of the political drama that's going on and a lot of the character drama that's happening. The fighting is more of an afterthought, and it's sometimes like a means to an end, which I think is kind of lazy and kind of shows a little bit of lack of creativity in writing. We'll talk about that later. So yeah, I guess it would be for someone who wants like a slower paced Arabian fantasy themed show. I think this is surprisingly, this is a perfect example for you. But just someone who likes fantasy and is just looking for like a nice, longer, slower paced show.
So maybe somebody who likes Seven Deadly Sins, or somebody who likes Black Clover,
Yeah,
or
I would-
something like that.
It definitely has the fantasy element in common with those. But I guess I would say for Seven Deadly Sins and Black Clover, they both have very different stories. So I'm not sure if I would recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it for story reasons. I would just recommend it for like the fantasy aesthetic then at that point. Whereas like if we're thinking about like a story that's similar, I don't know, it's a little bit similar to Game of Thrones in the sense of a lot of people are like plotting things and other people are also plotting things, and you never really know who's going to come out on top. Well, I mean, you kind of do because it's fucking anime,
Yeah.
and it's kind of predictable. So it's not even close to the same level as like Game of Thrones, like seasons 1 through 4, but maybe about the same level as like season 8.
Well, it is about a number of different kingdoms.
Yes.
Kind of jockeying for position.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how well they set that out,
Yes,
but
yeah. So this was the first season of Magic came out in 2012 and it ended in 2013, and the second season actually came out literally a couple months later. The first season came out on October 6th, I believe, October 7th, and then the next season came out a year later on October 7th or 6th, so very close together. Those were both done by A1 Pictures, in fact. And then in 2014, 2015, they did 5 OVAs for Sinbad. That was done by fucking Layduce studio. I've never heard
of it.
Never heard of them. And that's because they don't do like anything. They did the full series of Adventures of Sinbad. That's basically it. And it's like,
do you feel that the quality of animation was much different between the two?
No, I don't. I think the really quality of animation was fine. It just definitely shows that interest in the show was really dropping. And like you go from like a pretty big studio like A1 Pictures to a studio that is super like a studio I had never heard of until I looked this up to see who did it. And they also got licensed by Netflix. And like Netflix asked for this. Like this was a Netflix original, and so like they asked these people specifically to make them the show.
I'm a little surprised if Netflix was involved that they didn't continue, because one thing that Magi and Sinbad have in common, I feel, is that both of them ended kind of in the middle of the story.
Absolutely.
Sinbad, you get up to a point where you think you know a lot of the different kingdoms and what they're going to do and how there's going to be a fight between all of these brothers and sisters in one kingdom, and it leads you right up to that point, and then it's just over. And same for Sinbad. He's like gathering his followers, and he gets about halfway through, and it's just over.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think the shows did not get as much success as the studios were hoping for, and they just weren't having another season. Like 2 25-episode seasons is nothing to scoff at. That's quite a lot for anime terms. But I don't know. It's just not enough sometimes. Like,
do you know? I don't really read manga, but I know that you do quite a bit. Did the story go further in manga?
Yes. The Magi series went from like 2009 to like 2017 is when it ended, so it went beyond where the show ended.
Did it complete the story, or did it end?
Yes, it's done. And then Adventures of Sinbad, I believe, also came to a close in like 2019. Maybe it started up around like 2014, 2013. I'm not too sure about Adventures of Sinbad.
So I guess if you really like Magi or Sinbad, you could go to the manga and finish out the story.
Or you could like look up on the wiki pages and just read what happens to the characters. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But speaking of the story of Magi, I'm going to quickly give a little bit of a synopsis of it, just so if you haven't watched it and you're watching this and you do not care about watching Magi, maybe this will get you into it. It's basically about this boy named Aladdin. He starts off the story talking to like this cosmic being almost of Ugo, and he gets sent down to Earth, or whatever. I think it's just called Earth. And he meets this little boy named Alibaba. I say little boy, but Aladdin's probably about 11 or 12, and Alibaba's probably like 14 or 15. And they go into this thing called a dungeon, which exists in this world. It's essentially this big-ass tower, and you have to complete challenges to, complete the tower. And once you complete the tower, you get a djinn. And djinns are like these super powerful beings that grant you special abilities. And so they meet Morgiana before the tower, and they have to fight her in the tower. And essentially, after that, they all go their separate ways when they leave the tower. And the story really gets kickstarted from there. The 3 main characters are Aladdin, Alibaba, and Morgiana. And a lot of the story stems around their relationships. And I don't want to explain every single arc, but the story is less about like their travels together and more about their, I don't know. I guess I would say season 1 actually is about their travels together, and in season 2 they get separated from one another.
They each have their personal
they all have their
personal travels to do.
And yeah, but we're not here today to talk about Alibaba, Aladdin, and Morgiana. We're here to talk about fucking Sinbad, because Sinbad's the coolest goddamn motherfucker. My dad said I should stop swearing because he thinks I'm alienating the younger audience, but I don't know. You have to swear when you're referencing Sinbad. He's just that cool. Like, I don't know what to say.
Sinbad is by far the best character.
Yeah.
The way he is introduced is kind of legendary, and it's really good.
Yeah, we won't tell you that because that's probably one of the few.
It's
Good
a nice
scenes
little,
in
nice little
Magi.
surprise.
Yes,
And he's just awesome.
he is. He's really stellar. He makes the show go from like potentially being like a very like mediocre kind of like a passive a show to actually being worth watching just to see Sinbad and all his glory.
Yeah, he's the Captain Levi of
He's
the
the
story,
Irwin
if you
Smith,
will.
honey. Like, he's Captain Levi and Irwin Smith combined. That's what Sinbad is.
He's pretty awesome. But it does kind of become problematic because he is so overpowered and so
Yes.
cool and so, able to take care of any challenge that pretty much anything that comes up, he could handle it
Yes.
easily.
So
they have to find ways to kind of keep
every
him out
time.
of the action and keep
Every
him
time.
away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the other characters would have nothing to do.
But that they also do use that to their advantage. Like in the Balbad arc, the whole point of that arc is Alibaba has to struggle with, like owning up to his princely duties while helping his buddy who betrayed him in the past. He has to like live up to not only like impressing himself but to also be comparable to Sinbad, because Sinbad's in Balbad and he's trying to help Alibaba, but at the same time he just completely outshines Alibaba in every way imaginable. So Alibaba really, he doesn't like grow jealous of him, I would say. It's more just he develops like this inferiority complex because he's comparing
Because
himself
he is
to Sinbad.
inferior.
Yeah, because he is inferior, and that's just how it is. Like Sinbad's just that guy, you know.
Can't, yeah. Oh.
Like I don't want to talk about manga here, and I know, if someone watches this and they've read the manga, they'll be like, "Well, actually, this happens to Sinbad in the manga." It's like, yeah, I know what happens to Sinbad in the manga, but we're not talking about the manga today because Mama hasn't read the manga. I've just read what happens, and I've actually read it myself. So we're not going to talk about manga. We're just going to talk about the anime. And now we'll get into the actual discussion. So, Mama, what would you say are your favorite parts about Magi?
Sinbad is my favorite part. I like, well, this is a double-edged thing. I like that each of their characters has sort of their own path and arc and their own goal. Alibaba, he's the illegitimate son of a king, and then he's called upon to help out his kingdom because his brothers are kind of useless, and that's a whole thing, and he wants to be worthy of that. And Aladdin has a whole different story that he's going through. Morgiana has her own thing. So they're all interesting stories, but I do feel it's a problem that there's not really one main character. There's a little bit too much division. It's not like Aladdin is the main character and the others are side stories. It's like they all kind of share the spotlight equally, or at least Alibaba and Aladdin do. And I don't know, that wasn't my favorite.
Yeah, I would say Aladdin is the main character, but yeah, it's definitely like a dual protagonist type story, which I don't dislike. Again, like Hunter x Hunter's a dual protagonist story, but those protagonists are so much better.
So much better.
Like, don't get me wrong, I love Yuki Kaji. Alibaba, one of the weaker roles he's done for sure. Like not in his performance, just the character itself is so like boring. There's nothing that's like unique about him. Is really the problem.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he doesn't have great leadership skills. He doesn't have great fighting skills. He doesn't have that much of a personality even. He's like kind of nice, but also kind of not. Like Aladdin's the nicer of the two. It's like what what is his personality? I guess it kind of works to the benefit of the character, where like the story of Alibaba is to learn not to compare himself to other people, because whenever he does, he just realizes how much he sucks compared to other people. So he just tries to be the best that he can be, which I can appreciate. It's a nice, cute story, a good way of telling it. I think they do a good job for the first season, especially.
Yeah, the first season was definitely stronger
Absolutely.
than the second.
Yeah.
The second had many more problems and issues that I had problems with.
I will say the best part of the show, at least for me, was just how everything looked. It was so colorful, so unique. It is so refreshing to watch a fantasy show and not have it be like medieval England. I'm so fucking sick of seeing like the isekai, like, oh, we live in like stone houses and all that. It's like, yeah, mate, that's great. Can you just change it a little bit? Just a little bit. And I think that's something that the show did really nice for me, was like it focuses a lot more on the political aspect of you know of like these fantasy worlds, at least in season 1. That's what it mostly is. In season 2 kind of, but it's like they do it like a lot of like metaphorical stuff, like for like racism and poverty, but then they do it like literally as well. So I think if they just kept it to metaphors, it would be better. But
I think the animation was really pretty and magical. They have the type
cool
of
monsters and stuff.
And the magic is at least partly by these little butterfly type things called Rook.
Yep.
Rook or Rook. And
RUKH.
Right. They're golden usually, and they fly around, and it is very magical and cool.
And it's very unique, like I said. It's just a very refreshing take on something. It's based off of like Arabian myths and legends, and not to say that is like underutilized, but it's definitely not as oversaturated of a market as like, Britain and stuff.
Sure.
Like if I see one more fucking Arthur Pendragon in one of these shows, I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm gonna lose my mind.
It is really strange that the Japanese anime industry seems to really focus on King Arthur in England and like Britannia.
I love King Arthur. He's cool. In Seven Deadly Sins, he's cool. In Fate, he's cool. And everything, he's cool.
But he doesn't have to be in everything.
He doesn't have to be in everything. You know, like.
And he's misplaced in a lot of. But he is not in Magi, so yay.
He is not. So, at least not in the
not
anime.
that we know of.
Not in the anime.
He's not shown up yet.
Maybe he comes eventually, but not yet. So that's a good thing. That is definitely my favorite part. Like I already alluded to, I like the political nature of it as well. It's just nice to not have something where the main character's like first idea to solve a problem is just like by fighting his way out of it. It does get a little bit boring sometimes. Like even like Hunter x Hunter, a show I love. Basically every solution that they ever come up with is, oh, let's go fight the bad guys. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that.
Good solution.
It is a good solution, but it's nice to see them do something a little bit different, Yeah.
Well, I do feel that Magi, the magic or power system, is a little bit confusing to me.
We'll get into the power system later.
Okay.
I got some plans for that.
Okay.
But now let's move on to things that we do not particularly like. I guess if you wanted to start off with the power system,
I'll just say
that's actually something
it
I
has
do
many
like.
pieces to it. I'm not sure they all fit together, and it was a bit confusing to me as far as the power system. But we can elaborate on that later. I would say there were specific situations and characters I didn't like the story of. In the second season, they go to a magic school, which I thought was going to be super cool. I was really excited for it. Started out kind of strong, and then it just all went to hell. It was a really kind of dumb story. They brought in a lot of other characters out of nowhere that I don't think added much to the overall story. Just made it a little more confused. And I really didn't like, we've talked about this before, Morgiana is a character who belongs to a certain abused group of people called...
The Finalists, I believe?
Yeah, the Finalists or something like that. And they're supposed to be super strong, and they've been kind of hunted almost to extinction, and her journey is to find and reunite with her people who live on another continent. And then at the end, we meet a bunch of that people, and they're so ridiculously overpowered, it just makes no sense whatsoever. And I really hated that part of it.
I'll talk about all that stuff when we get into the power system, because this show has a bunch of them.
It does, and they all are supposed to coexist or something.
Yes, and that's one of the problems with it. I definitely agree with the sentiment that season 2 is far worse. I thought the whole racism, ideology of the Magna Shoot people was just a little bit like silly and overdone. It's like, yeah, I get those guys were bad to him in the past, but that doesn't mean that he would like try to commit like genocide just for funsies. And I get the whole idea is like the evil Rook is guiding evil Rook is like guiding them and stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's great and all. Doesn't make a lot of sense if you ask me. Yeah, it's just a lot of the stuff in season 2 is so weak. There's the arc of the mom like kidnapping all the little kids. That doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And when you split up the 3 main characters, right? Morgiana's doing something interesting. Alibaba is doing something interesting. The only one who's not doing something interesting is Aladdin. And we spend like 80% of our time with Aladdin. I don't give a fuck about Alexius Titus or the fuck that person's name was. You know, the clone of the one Magi. I don't care about that person. I do not.
Nope.
Don't show him to me. Like you're introducing me to a character in the middle of the fucking 2nd season, and you like care about this person. I'm like, no, I will not, because there's no goddamn reason for me to care about them. You have not given me anything to like.
Honestly, once Sinbad showed up, I just sort of wanted to follow what Sinbad was
Exactly.
doing, and I just wanted everybody else could go off and do their own thing and show up or not. I didn't really care. But they didn't really follow much of what Sinbad was doing.
No,
so
in season 2, they basically say, see you, Sinbad, and I get it. It's because Aladdin doesn't really trust Sinbad too much. And Aladdin was going to go do his own thing anyways. It's happenstance that Alibaba and Morgiana just go out and do their own thing.
Alibaba's arc, when he went to the
Reem Coliseum.
Yeah, the Coliseum to fight.
Or it's Reem.
Ridiculous, of course, but like he's going to be able to fight in the Coliseum. But probably the most interesting arc, in my opinion, that he did.
I'm not sure if it would be ridiculous. He is a djinn wielder. Even if he's not very good at wielding his djinn,
he can barely handle it. He can barely make his weapon, and he's like a little kid. You know, he's fighting against these seasoned veterans. And
I disagree.
I thought it was kind of
having
ridiculous.
a djinn is such an advantage. I get that he doesn't even use his djinn in the Coliseum, but it's more about like he has to like push his limits. It's not like can he do it or not. It's that he has to do it so he can, you know, hold a candle to.
Well, I'm just
Aladdin
saying, I thought that arc was the most interesting that he was involved in. The arc when it was about his childhood friend who betrayed him, and then he forgave him, and then he died, and really overwrought, and overdone, and it kept coming back. Oh my gosh, I was so sick of that arc.
That is the problem with Magi. It tries to do too much at the same time. It's like, oh, by the way, Qasim is actually being influenced by the evil Rook, and he's being manipulated by like Alma Thorn or whatever the fuck the evil group's name was called.
There were way too many.
And then it's like at the same time, Aladdin is conversing with King Solomon. He gets King Solomon's wisdom, and then he comes back, but he can't save the day without Alibaba's help. And it's like, dude, you gotta introduce the stuff slowly. Like the wisdom of Solomon should have been introduced in like episode 5 or something. Like when he was just fucking off with those horse people.
I don't remember that.
Remember
what horse people?
In that village where they're all like really good horse riders.
Oh yeah, they weren't horse people.
They weren't horse people.
There's like nomadic people or something.
They liked horses, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
When he was like over there, he should have done. They should have done more. They should have spent more fucking time building up these ideas that were going to be important later.
It does feel like the writer was like, oh, here's a cool idea, let's introduce it. Yeah. And then they would drop it and start with another cool idea and then rinse and repeat.
I remember
they didn't complete anything, and there's just all these shadowy conspiracies out there doing who knows what, and then the ending was kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I remember like episode 4 or something maybe, when they're completing the dungeon and they're beating Morgiana and stuff. I remember he uses the Rook very well there. So maybe they like foreshadow the Eye of the Solomon's wisdom or something there, but I don't know. I can't really remember, and it wasn't very good, even if it does. But I will say another thing that is fantastic about the show: the dungeons. The dungeons are so beautiful, so creative, so well done. They just really knock him out of the park, which is why it's such a fucking disappointment that so much of the show is outside of the dungeons.
They barely use it. The whole idea is these towers start appearing across the land, and people can go into them, and if they can defeat the tower, they get the power of the genie. The djinn. Yeah. But most people die, so thousands and thousands of people die. Yeah. They can't complete the tower, and only a few people can do it. And guess what Sinbad does?
He's the first motherfucker to clear a tower. And at the age of like 14 or 15, he's just the coolest guy.
How many towers does he clear?
7.
Right. And he'd clear more, but they made him stop.
they made him stop because they were like, you have too many goddamn djinns, dude. If you, like, I'll become your djinn if you just stop getting more djinns. Like, holy shit.
Yeah. So that's what gives them the power of the djinn. So
Yeah.
But that's like a whole cool, interesting thing that you could build a whole show over of people going into the towers and defeating the towers and very, very little used.
Yeah, it definitely would be a way more exciting show to just have a band of adventurers. Like I said, I really like the political nature of it, but I think a show that is just about the action and about characters being pushed to their limits and having to learn to trust each other, like by going through these dungeons and stuff, I think that would be a way more interesting show. And I guess we have shows like that, like Don Machi is kind of like that, where, you know, it's just him going to the dungeon over and over. And, you know, it's not like this is the most unique idea of having a dungeon in a show, but I think they do it very well. And I think they make it very clear that having a djinn user is a very big, like, importance to these nations. So it still ties into, like, the political aspect of, like, if you have more djinn users than other people do, you're probably just going to be stronger than them. You kind of get to bully them.
It's like a nuclear war type deal. You get the warheads.
And that's why Sinbad is so crazy. He's fucking 7. So basically no one can fight him because he's just way stronger than everyone else is. Like, he has more djinns than the entire Ku Empire. Maybe not the entirety of it, but he has close to the same number as the entirety of the Ku Empire. Like, how crazy is that?
And they did do more with the towers in Sinbad, the show Sinbad.
Oh, yeah.
That was a lot more. I think they use that much more effectively there.
Absolutely.
And another thing, maybe you can explain to me. So the character Aladdin, we haven't really talked about this, but Aladdin is a little boy, but it's revealed during the show that he's actually a special being called a Magi. And traditionally there's only 3 Magis at one time in the world, but suddenly he appears as the 4th one, and nobody really knows why he's there, how he got there, how he got his power, who he is. He's just this little boy with this crazy power.
Yeah.
Does it ever explain to us why? Like at the very end with that whole other planet thing, does that have something to do with why he came there? I'm really not quite clear.
This is a manga spoiler, so I guess I could say if I want to spoil the manga, but I said we weren't going to talk about the manga. Oh. Do you want me to tell you anyways?
Sure.
Yeah, so he's essentially the son of King Solomon. So Sinbad is actually his granddad, kind of.
Sinbad is Aladdin's grandfather?
Well, Sinbad has like the rook of Solomon's dad. So he is the rook of David. And Aladdin is Solomon's son. So
okay.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
It's just I felt it either I just missed out on it, but
no, you didn't miss out on it.
It just was kind of muddy, like who he is and why he's there.
Yeah.
And does he have a mission? I guess he does.
It's like when Solomon's world was getting destroyed, his wife, who was pregnant with Aladdin, gave her son to Ugo to keep safe in the
I see.
In the whatever chamber area they call
the
it.
Tower.
Whatever you want to call it. The dream world, whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really liked the Ugo flute thing at first. I thought that was really cool. And I liked Aladdin's hat, how that also works as like a flying
carpet.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was really cool. And it's those kinds of things where they're just kind of shown and they're never explained. It's just like, oh, these are cool fantasy tools that help us out.
Yeah.
And I thought that was super fun. And then they just kind of go away from them. And I'm like, come on, guys. Yeah. It's supposed to be fantasy. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be interesting.
It was fantasy. It was fun. But there are... it could have been so much better.
Yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
I'm going to say.
It's not. Miss a lot
it's not a great show. It's not the worst show. It's kind of a light, fun show for the most part. And Sinbad is awesome.
Well, one of the problems I particularly have with it is that a lot of the show is like power of friendship stuff. And don't get me wrong, I like 7 Deadly Sins. 7 Deadly Sins does that too. But in this show, it's like, goddamn.
Boku no Hero.
If you took a shot every time Alibaba cried or said something about his friends, like, you would be fucking dead in like 20 episodes, man. Like, it is so crazy how often he talks about that stuff. or even like Aladdin too, and like Morgiana to some extent. It's like I get it. Friendship is important. I get that's like the moral of the story. I get it. But you don't have to bring it up
A little
every time.
heavy-handed, yeah.
Yeah, just not very graceful. You can do that kind of stuff in a better way, and it really frustrates me when we don't see that come to fruition. Like, it's a good show. I would recommend it to some people, like I said, and I've rewatched it. So I definitely like it to some extent, but I wouldn't ever consider it like one of my favorites. I mean, I did actually consider it to be on my top 10 list just because No Game No Life and Boku no Hero were such like weak placements that I was like, maybe Magic could go on there. But
you only thought of that because of Sinbad. If Sinbad wasn't
if
in
Sinbad
it, we would
wasn't
never.
in the show, not even close.
Sinbad elevates it significantly.
Absolutely.
But it's not enough.
Absolutely. And like Judar is a weak antagonist. It's just not very good. Like, a lot of the bad guys aren't that interesting. Like, because one of the problems is like there's the whole mystery about who really are the bad guys. They have like that secret society thing.
Shadowy society.
Yeah, and they're always trying to go after Sinbad, and they're like, "You damn singularity of a man, why are you so fucking cool?" And Sinbad's like,
and
I'm
why
sorry, I
are
can't help
they? It didn't make sense. The reason they are bad, what they're trying to do, it made no sense whatsoever.
They're evil because they're evil, and it's like
they want to destroy the world.
Like
why?
I'm
Don't know.
fine. I'm fine with that. I am fine with that.
Like that.
But then you have to make them actually scary. There is no reason I'm scared of those people.
No.
Not when Sinbad's around.
No.
So, yeah. Yeah. That's just how it is. It's just not scary. Straight up.
Yeah.
So
this is the reason people don't talk about magic.
This is because we just are shitting on. No, it's a good show. I feel like we're being overly harsh, perhaps.
It's easier to find fault than to talk about
Yes.
the good stuff of it. Obviously, it was good enough that I watched 2 seasons and
Adventures of
Sinbad.
Yeah, do you want to talk about Sinbad specifically? Like the show Sinbad, that is? Because we talked a lot about the main series of Magi. I haven't really said anything about Sinbad, Magi.
Well, like I said, I think they use the towers more effectively. I thought, for my taste, they got a little bit too much into mercantile kind of stuff. Like, he wants to sell his produce or something from the different lands. Like, that's not really what I want to watch when I'm watching this kind of stuff. But yeah, I get that he's wanting to build his kingdom. He's wanting to build his, dream of what a kingdom should be, and he has to learn all these skills. But I didn't care if he could sell at a profit for this or that. That was kind of dumb. But
I just think they missed a chance with introducing Masrur. I think that's his name. Masrur.
Which one was he?
He was the finalist that followed Sinbad.
Oh, yeah.
And they teased that in the next season they were going to show
they
how he
didn't
met
introduce
him. And that is the one I was most interested in. Like, obviously him and Jafar, but like once you get them introduced to each other, there's really not much more. I will say, Sinbad, the show itself, I think has way more interesting characters than Magi does. Like, I think, like, we see the 8 generals in Magi, but we don't really see them do anything. And I just think that they're more fun to be around, really, than, like, Aladdin, Alibaba, and Morgiana.
Sinbad wasn't a great show either, but
no,
it had a more interesting story. Like, here's a story of this kid who's born, and there's something special about him. And then as he grows, you see some of the special things about him, like what he can do and how he affects people and what his vision is. And the story is really about him gathering people to him. People are drawn to him, like all these super powerful, amazing people in their own right that think they're all that. They meet Sinbad and they become his disciple, essentially. And that just happens over and over. And it's kind of an interesting story, and it builds up, and they take some, side stories off.
Yeah, I think that's something I like more than Magi, is where Aladdin is special, but we don't know why he's special. Like, he's special because he was just, like, I guess, lucky to be a Magi. Like, we don't know where he's come from. We don't know why he's, like, an important piece of the puzzle. We just know
and he's
that
a little kid.
Whereas Sinbad, when he's born, he like everyone recognizes that he's gonna be special, but he's not like special because he was born as like a prince or anything. He's special because he went and took things by himself. He's special because he himself is genuinely a special person, and it's way
Right.
more interesting to watch that than it is to watch Aladdin grope some anime bitches'
That
titties.
is
You know,
something that Aladdin and your favorite
Meliodas,
Meliodas from Seven Deadly
but
Sins have
Meliodas
in
will
common.
only grope Elizabeth. You know,
Yeah,
Aladdin will just grope anyone.
yeah.
He doesn't care.
But for all that, the show isn't terribly etchy.
It's not pervy
It's
or
really
anything.
not. It's just he's a little kid and he
Yeah.
grabs a girl's boob once in a while.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the extent of it. I mean,
Oh.
I guess there's scantily clad women,
Would
but
you say this show is funny at all, or not really?
at times, I think it tries to be funny more
Yes,
than it is
tries.
funny.
It tries very
but there
hard.
are amusing moments and yeah. So I think it's kind of for all the political stuff. It's mostly lighthearted,
Yeah.
you know, at heart, and then it has, you know, the arcs about poverty and
Mm-hmm.
abuse and all of those negative things, but the core of it is more of a lighthearted, friendly sort of show, I think.
Yeah. Now, I want to transition to something that I know I told you about. I want to introduce it to the podcast. This is something I thought we should do. We'll test it out and see how much we like it. But it's picking a scene or two from the show that we are talking about, and whether it's our favorite scene or a show that or a scene that we think is like the most influential to the show, or the scene that we think expresses like why the show is good. I asked Mama to try to think of a scene that you can think of that for Magi. Did you think of something?
I've thought of one, but it's kind of a negative one.
Oh.
Okay. So, like I said about the finales and
Yeah.
how they're overpowered. So, there's a scene towards the end of the second season where a bunch of people get together and fight, like from different countries
Mhm.
and different levels of ability. And there's people there that have jinns that they control that can, they're flying around the sky doing all kinds of stuff, lightning bolts, fire bolts, everything you can
It's crazy.
possibly
Yeah.
imagine. Huge amounts of power everywhere. And the finales are a group of redheaded people, and they're strong. That's basically it. They're strong.
Yep.
But suddenly, this group of finales are just kicking everybody's butt. They're like faster and stronger and more powerful, and they can kill these people with genies, and it's just ridiculous. And that's where I felt
Well,
it kind of jumped the
I don't
shark.
think
It's
they
like,
killed anyone with the gym, but
did they not?
think they
I don't
did.
know. They did ridiculous. Like nobody could stop them. Like they had these magical barriers up that none of the magicians could get through. There's like a whole school of magicians all working, to hold this barrier up, and people trying to knock it down. And they send the finales out, and they just knock it down because they're the finales. I
Yeah.
did not like that scene at all, as you can see.
Wow. I'm gonna go for a very different kind of scene.
Okay.
I'm gonna go for one of the scenes in like episode like 9 or 10 ish, when Alibaba and Sinbad are talking to what's his name, Sambad Saluja. Basically, he's Alibaba's half brother.
Was he the nice dumb
he was
one?
the nice one. He was well, he wasn't dumb, but he was like the coward one.
He was like anxiety, like almost
Yes.
agoraphobic.
Yes.
Anxiety,
And he comes to Alibaba in the carriage, and he begs Alibaba to go take the throne, because he knows he can't take the throne, and he knows his brother is going to sell out the people of Baalbad as slaves so they can have money, and he knows only Alibaba can save them. And when Alibaba is confronted with this, he does not particularly know what to do. He's just very lost, and who else but Sinbad steps in, and he makes bold claims. Excuse me. He basically saves Alibaba's butt in that scene, and I think that is a very good scene, because like I talked about, it's very descriptive of Alibaba's character as well as Sinbad's character, and the fact that Morgiana and Aladdin let Alibaba kind of make this mistake of like not taking leadership of his own, to do what the right thing is. Actually, Aladdin might be in his coma right now. I can't remember.
Not much different.
Not much of a difference. Either way, it just really shows off the characters well, and it's the political drama that season 1, relishes in so well. I just thought it was really good. I really like that scene, and obviously I could pick out a scene where Sinbad pops off. There's a couple of them.
The introductory scene of Sinbad is the best scene in the whole show.
Probably. You get to see sexy Sinbad abs.
Oh yeah, and more.
Yeah, who can disagree with that? You know what I'm saying? Another scene I would say I liked was, or a scene that I think is important rather than liking it, is when Ali Baba resolves everything with Qasim, like when he goes into Qasim's mind and stuff, and then like you see the Rook of Qasim and his sister, join the light flow. I thought that was nice. I also think it's super important to Ali Baba's character, and Ali Baba, I would argue, is the main character of the show. Again, it's like a dual protagonist thing. Sometimes it's Aladdin, sometimes it's Ali Baba. I say season 1 is mostly Ali Baba.
I agree that scene was a beautiful scene, but at that point, I was so tired of Qasim. I was like, go to the light.
Get out of here.
Go to the light.
Yeah, I can see that too. Qasim was definitely an annoying character. But again, it's just those kinds of scenes, while they maybe don't make the show stand out from anything else, it definitely shows that they were at least trying. And, I can appreciate that. I feel like a lot of shows just don't even try anymore. I feel like they half-ass a story just so they can have good animation on hot anime bitches, and it's like, well, that's not enough to... That's
there
just
weren't
not
a lot of hot anime girls.
There's like Morgiana, like Yamaria.
And a few princessy type people here and there.
You remember her? She had like the seashells on her.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Mm-hmm. And then in Sinbad, there are a lot more pretty women than Sinbad.
But there were no harems of girls following people around, really.
Well, in Sinbad, he literally has like 5 girls on his arms at all times.
Sinbad's an exception.
Right, and not even in Sinbad. I mean, in Magi, when you're in Sindrio and you're just looking at Sinbad, he's just always with girls.
You can't help attracting the women.
I mean,
just saying that they weren't necessarily his harem.
True. Yeah, you're right. All right, now we're moving on to what will probably be our final segment. Let me get this up here. You can talk about whatever you want.
Oh, you're putting something up on the screen.
Yes.
Were we going to talk about the power?
Yes, and that is what I'm doing here.
Oh.
So I've got out my tier list. And what we're going to do, this is going to be an ongoing segment through all of our podcasts, where every time we're winding down an episode, we're going to put that show on the tier list. And I have 5 different tier lists picked out. I have one for story, one for characters, one for music, one for power system, and one for overall. So we get to pick where we would put these characters, or where we put the show in on a tier list based on story. And as you can see, we also have Goblin Slayer on here. I had to put 2 so I could make the tier list, so you guys can have a little bit of a spoiler for what's coming next time. But so, Mama, for anime story, or just for story in general, I guess. For
story in general,
where would you put Magi?
Fairly low, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, between 5 and 6, I would say.
We're talking a tier list, Mama, so it's either S, A, B, C, or D, I believe.
C for story.
Really? Mm-hmm. I was thinking more like a B.
I don't feel strongly about it.
Why did you say C?
Just because, like, the hidden, shadowy people. Like, I just don't think things were well defined. The villains weren't well defined. Yeah. The heroes were kind of scattered, other than Sinbad. They were all doing their own thing. I was confused about Aladdin's purpose in this world and where he came from.
I guess when I think of story, I also think of like setting and that kind of stuff. And I think the setting is so good that it really, like, I just love the...
I'm thinking just strictly plot.
Aesthetic look of the show.
I do like that. I would give that much higher. I would give that.
Well, because that's not its own thing, because a lot of things kind of look the same. I guess I could make it its own tier list after this one, if we wanted to.
Setting, I'd give it a B.
All right, so we'll go C for story, and then I'll make a tier list later tonight, and I'll put it as a B. Sorry, guys, I don't have it set up now, so you'll just have to trust me. I do that later. All right, so that's for story. Now we're gonna move on to characters. Where would you put the ranking of the characters? Not
Is there an S list?
There is an S list, but we're
Sinbad's in the S list.
We're not taking the characters out of the story. We're taking all the characters, putting them together, and then we're comparing them to other shows. So where do you think the story? Where do you think the characters should end up? I would say B tier, and if not for Sinbad, I'd probably say like C tier.
It's C tier all the way except for Sinbad, who's an S.
You
so
can't
it's
put
gonna
Sinbad,
raise it to a B.
Yeah, so it has to be B, right? Because Sinbad's just
Sinbad's there. You can't put it lower than a B.
Yeah, I mean we're in agreement on this one.
Yeah,
Sinbad's really the only character I really like the design for. Like he's just so cool. Yeah, I mean I don't know what else you want me to say. He's just super cool.
Yeah.
All right, now we're on to music, and I'm gonna have to say a C or D for this one. I like the first two openings. I like the third ending. All that stuff is great. I cannot tell you a single fucking theme of the entire show. I can't even think of it in my head.
Like Middle Eastern kind of music-y.
Yeah.
Like I know nothing
I
about
don't remember
music.
it though. That's my whole thing.
Yeah. Luke is the music person with this. I don't remember.
It's like I know a lot of themes. Like like in those anime quizzes we do, if they were to play the Magi, like just like the general theme for the entire show, I do not say I would recognize.
You would recognize the first opening though. The first opening is quite good.
I recognize the second opening too. I recognize that stuff. But does that count for music? I guess it does. So maybe like a C. Yeah.
I think a C. Because it wasn't bad. It wasn't jarring.
Yeah.
It didn't take away from the show or anything like that. It just wasn't super special.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Attack on Titan.
I would say I have to agree.
Yeah.
All right, now we're on to what we've all been waiting for, the power system. So I just want to talk about the power systems first before we actually get into ranking it. A lot of people really like the Magi power system because it has quite a few. And I would say that I agree with some of it, and I disagree with other parts of it. Like, I think the Rook is a very cool idea. I think the way it's translated is very cool, where we can see the Rook flying out of stuff, and we can kind of get who's stronger in certain situations. And obviously, Magi get to bend other people's Rook to their will, so that's kind of cool.
That is cool.
Yes.
They didn't just stop with that.
No, they did not stop with that. The problem is, and like, here's the other good part. Here, like, if it was just Rook and Djinns, this is easily like an A, maybe even S for me, because Djinns are so smart. It's like if you capture a dungeon and you work really hard at learning how to use your Djinn, it gives you a certain power, and the certain power is just based on the Djinn. It's not based on your personality. It's not based on some kind of skills you have. It's just based on what your Djinn type is. So it's super simple, right? Like, oh, Alibaba has a fire type Djinn. He can use fire powers. Sinbad has a lightning Djinn. He can use lightning powers. That's just how it is.
Sinbad has one of every kind of Djinn, basically. So, but what about the, I forget what they called it, but like if you have house servant type thing, they also gets, a vessel power.
Yes.
That's another thing.
And that one's a little bit murkier, and like how many people can get there. I think it's just one person per Djinn. That's why Sinbad has like 7 Djinns and like 7 followers, maybe, or 8 followers. He's 8 followers because one's a mage. So I think it's 1 per person. And, they kind of work in the same way. I don't get how Morgiana can fly with hers. That seems like a bit of a stretch, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Either way, it's still cool. The Djinn system works well. And then you got magic, which really has no business being in this show. Because the problem is with the Rook and magic together, it's like people have their own Magoi that they can use for magic, but Magi's can, use the Rook to do spells, but they can also use other people's Magoi to use spells. So it's very ill-defined.
Weren't the magicians just using Rook? Like,
were they?
Wasn't the Magi just sucking the life force out of people and turning it into Rook and then using it for their magic spells or something? It wasn't clear.
It was not clear. And then they also have like magical weapons and stuff, and like magical tools that also use Rook or maybe they use Magoi. It's just really not well defined.
And do the Jinn use Rook too?
No,
I thought the Jinn used Rook.
They use Magoi as well.
Is it Magoi?
I don't know. I don't know what it is, Mama. It's just not very well defined. It's just very poor.
And then you got the Finalis out there for some reason that are stronger than everybody else.
If you're a mage user, you can't use a Jinn. It's like, how does that make any sense? It doesn't. Well, then you have the Finalists who are just, for some reason, like the fucking Ackermans, they're just super overpowered for no reason.
But the Ackermans are reasonably overpowered. And the Finalis are unreasonably overpowered.
See what Levi did to that one guy?
Don't.
I said
don't
that
spoil
one
Attack
guy.
on Titan.
I said that one guy. That could mean fucking anything, Mama.
All right, just that is not.
I'm not gonna spoil Attack on Titan.
You can spoil Magi. Nobody cares.
Episode.
Yeah.
Either way. Yeah, the Finalists, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It would be okay if there's like 3 of them or something, but there's like 20. That's too many to have them be that ridiculously strong.
So in Magic, we got the Rook, the regular Rook.
Yeah.
We got the Dark Rook.
Yeah.
We got Magi, whatever that is. We got the Jinns and their power.
Yeah.
We got a whole academy of magicians, wizards, or whatnot. And we got super strong Finalis. And we got house vessels.
Yep.
And we got magic weapons of some sort.
It's too
just
much.
It's too much.
It's just like with everything else in Magi. They just try to do too much, and that stops them from doing anything super well. It allows them to do a lot of things decently, but nothing like super amazingly. And I think that's just one of the biggest problems with Magi. Is like just being too overzealous in how they approach their story. So where do you think the ranking should go for a power system? I kind of want to still say a little bit higher because like I appreciate
even though it's confusing. The Rook thing is beautiful.
Yeah,
I'd say B.
Yeah, I appreciate it way more than a lot of other shows. Like it's way better than 7 Deadly Sins, where it's just like, oh, you have power levels and random abilities. Fuck you. So I'm definitely gonna give that one at least a B. I would maybe consider like a low A, but obviously because we have nothing else in, it's like, what's the difference between an A and a low A? So I guess we'll go B for now. Maybe we'll move it up later.
What power system would you put in the A level?
I don't know. Maybe like Attack on Titan. I think that's pretty fair to say.
How about Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood?
Maybe be B for me.
The Alchemist, yeah.
And then it's probably us. Like, surprise, surprise. I know.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to B. Now the last one. An overall anime tier list. So, from S to D, where would you put the show overall, combining everything?
C.
C, really?
C for me. Probably B for you, I would think.
I was thinking more B. I was thinking like maybe like a 7.5-ish kind of score. About the same as Boku no Hero, I would say. I know we haven't gotten to Boku no Hero yet, but I would probably put it around that level of show. Really?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where we want to put it then. Rock, paper, scissors.
Can you put it in between?
No,
Can you give it a B minus, C plus?
Let's put it in.
I'll let you give it a B if you want. I just think there's a lot of shows I've enjoyed more.
Yeah, let's put it in C for right now, and then as like the best thing about this list is like none of this is set in stone. So as we change things around later, like as we add more to the list, if we find something that we're like, oh, this is C, but we think Magi is way better than this, then we can move Magi up, or it can move that thing down. You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
So we're giving Magi overall a C ranking.
Maybe a C plus.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the episode. Like I said, this is going to be an ongoing thing. So every week we're going to be updating this.
We can find out
or every time we do an episode.
Shows to each other.
Yes,
right?
And I think that would be very fun to do. Obviously, next week or next time we do this, we're going to be doing a Goblin Slayer. We might be doing a dual episode for that, so look out for that. And thanks for watching. You got anything to say, Mama?
Nope. It's fun to talk about.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched Magi, hopefully this didn't dissuade you too much. It's really a good show. I think a lot of people would like it. I'm just pretty harsh on it because, you know, it's one of the first shows I watched and I really liked it. And upon rewatching it, just was not as good as I remembered it being.
The more shows you watch, the more you have like a barometer for like what's really great and what's really trash. And Magi is neither great nor trash. It is somewhere in the middle. And it can be quite enjoyable and fun to watch, but it's not going to be a life-changing experience to watch it.
I'll leave you on this. If you really like fantasy-driven shows, this is definitely a good show for you. Like, it is such a cool, fun fantasy layout. It is definitely worth watching just for that alone.
Agreed.
And, not much else to say after that. So, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.